The lie that broke me was delivered with a smile. It was a warm, dismissive, pat-on-the-head kind of smile, the sort a man gives a child who has just presented him with a dandelion. Except I wasn't a child, and the dandelion was the entire foundation of his meteoric success. My husband, Julian, was a financial guru, a self-styled market whisperer. For 10 years, I had been the silent, supportive wife, the one who organized his life, proofread his articles, and listened patiently as he rehearsed his keynote speeches. I was Elara, the historian, the archivist. My world was vellum, ink, and the quiet dust of forgotten stories. His was the roaring pyre of ambition, fueled by charisma and what everyone believed was his unique genius. Our 10th anniversary was approaching. I knew he was planning a surprise party. Julian was as subtle as a neon sign in a library. His assistant, Chloe, would call me with flimsy excuses to get me out of the house. I'd find catering brochures tucked under his desk blotter. I played along, a weary actress in the final turgid act of a play I no longer wished to be in. The thought of celebrating a decade of our life together felt like celebrating a beautiful, ornate cage. The break happened 3 months before the party at the Global Innovators Summit in Geneva. Julian was the closing speaker. He was unveiling his Vanguard strategy, a revolutionary investment model that had made his clients millions and turned him into a financial celebrity. I sat in the front row, a knot of pride and anxiety in my stomach. This was our moment, our work. The Vanguard strategy wasn't born in a flash of Julian's brilliance. It was born in the dim light of the Royal Archives, in my hands. For 2 years, I had meticulously researched 17th century Dutch mercantile guilds, uncovering their sophisticated methods of risk diversification and futures trading. Concepts thought to be modern inventions. I had painstakingly translated ledgers, cross-referenced shipping manifests, and built a comprehensive model of a forgotten economic engine. I had given it all to Julian, a gift of love and intellect. "This is incredible, Elle," he'd said, his eyes gleaming. "This could change everything." On that stage in Geneva, under the glare of 1,000 spotlights, he took my gift and claimed it as a spoil of war. "The Vanguard strategy," he began, his voice resonating with practiced confidence, "came to me during a period of intense personal reflection. I asked myself, what are the fundamental timeless patterns of wealth creation? I looked past the noise of the 21st century and found my answer in the very origins of global capitalism." He laid out my research, my theories, my conclusions, all without a single mention of my name. He presented it as his own solitary Herculean effort. I sat frozen, my polite smile feeling like a plaster mask cracking on my face. The true humiliation came during the Q&A. A journalist from the Financial Times stood up. "Mr. Thorne, your insight into historical precedents is astonishing. Can you elaborate on your research process? It sounds like the work of a dedicated historian." Here it was. The moment he could acknowledge me, our partnership. He could have said, "My wife, Elara, is a brilliant historian, and her work was instrumental." He could have shared the credit. Instead, Julian laughed, a charming, self-deprecating chuckle that drew the audience in. "That's very kind of you. My wife, Elara, is indeed a wonderful archivist. She was a great help, actually. She dug up some dusty old ledgers for me in her spare time." He looked directly at me and gave me that smile, the dandelion smile. "Bless her heart, she's a fantastic little helper." The hall filled with polite, appreciative laughter. The heat rose in my cheeks, a furious, burning tide. Little helper. The words echoed in the vast auditorium, shrinking me, erasing me. In that single public moment, he hadn't just stolen my work. He had belittled my identity, my profession, and my worth, reducing 2 years of intense intellectual labor to a quaint little hobby. He had rendered me invisible. The flight home was a blur of silent tears I refused to let him see. He was jubilant, high on the adrenaline of his triumph, completely oblivious to the chasm that had just opened between us. He didn't notice the stillness in me, the way my love had curdled into something cold and hard and heavy. That night, as he slept, I sat in my study, the faint moonlight illuminating the spines of my books. Grief was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, but as the hours passed, the grief began to change. It transmuted under the immense pressure of my pain into something else. It crystallized into a single diamond-hard thought: revenge. Not a screaming match, not a tearful confrontation. He had humiliated me publicly with professional elegance. I would return the favor. His surprise party would be the perfect stage. He was building the theater. I would simply write the script for the final act. My transformation began. I was no longer Elara, the supportive wife. I became Elara, the archivist of his downfall. My research skills, which he had so casually dismissed, were now my greatest weapon. For the next 3 months, I lived a double life. First, I engaged a forensic accountant, a discreet woman named Ms. Albright who specialized in high-net-worth divorces. "He called you a little helper?" she'd said, a grim smile on her face. "Let's quantify the value of that help." Our prenuptial agreement, which Julian had insisted upon, stipulated a clean 50-50 split of all assets generated during the marriage. Ms. Albright began the meticulous invisible process of untangling our finances, creating a portfolio in my name, ready to receive half of the fortune my work had built. Second, I compiled my evidence. I was an archivist, and I had archived everything. I scanned my original research notes, the ones filled with my handwriting, my annotations, my eureka moments. I compiled the emails I'd sent him with timestamps where I explained the core concepts of the Dutch guild system. I created a timeline, cross-referencing my research diary with his development of the Vanguard strategy. The plagiarism was not just clear, it was blatant. I digitized everything, creating a slick corporate-style presentation. I would use the very language of his world to dismantle it. Third, I needed an ally. His business partner and best friend, Marcus, had always struck me as a decent man, perpetually in Julian's shadow. During a charity gala, I found my moment. I approached him, feigning concern. "Marcus, I worry about Julian," I said, my voice soft. "This fame. He seems to believe he did it all alone. He's forgetting the people who helped him get there." I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He had been there from the start. He knew. I didn't need to say more. I just needed to plant a seed of doubt and make one simple request. "For the anniversary party," I said, "I'm planning a little video tribute. A walk down memory lane. Could you make sure I have access to the AV system before the speeches?" He agreed without hesitation. The night of the party arrived. Our sprawling minimalist house was packed with over 200 people. Clients, investors, society figures, and family. Champagne flowed. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Julian was in his element, holding court, his arm possessively around my waist. He thought my quietness was demure admiration. He had no idea it was the calm before a Category 5 hurricane. I was not the mousy historian tonight. I wore a tailored crimson dress that stood out against the sea of black and navy suits. My hair, usually in a simple knot, was styled elegantly. I met every gaze with a serene confidence that seemed to disconcert people. I was an unknown variable in their predictable equation. "Surprise!" we all yelled as he was led into the main living area. He feigned shock beautifully, a hand to his chest, his face breaking into a wide, delighted grin. He kissed me, a performative, public kiss that tasted of ashes. "Elara, my love, you shouldn't have," he whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You deserve it," I replied, my voice even. After an hour of mingling and toasts, Marcus stepped up to the microphone. And now, I believe Julian's wonderful wife, Elara, has a few words and a special tribute she'd like to share. A warm, indulgent applause followed me as I walked to the small, raised platform. The large projection screen behind me, which Julian assumed would soon display a montage of our smiling holiday photos, glowed with a neutral blue background. He beamed at me from the front, a king admiring his devoted consort. I took a deep breath. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate a decade with my husband," I began, my voice clear and steady. The room quieted. 10 years is a long time. It's a time for reflection, for looking back at the journey. And what a journey it has been. I have had a front row seat to the evolution of a true innovator. Julian's smile widened. He preened. "Everyone here knows Julian for his masterpiece, the Vanguard strategy," I continued. "It's a strategy celebrated for its genius, its unique historical perspective. And tonight, I want to honor the true origin of that genius." With a discreet click of the remote in my hand, the screen behind me changed. It wasn't a photo of us in Tuscany. It was a high-resolution scan of a page from my notebook dated 3 years prior. My handwriting was unmistakable, mapping out the very first diagram of the risk-hedging mechanism used by the Amsterdam Spice Merchants Guild. A confused murmur rippled through the room. Julian's smile faltered, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Innovation rarely springs from a vacuum," I said, my tone shifting from warm tribute to a cool academic lecture. "It often stands on the shoulders of forgotten history. And sometimes," I paused, letting my eyes sweep the room before landing on him, "it stands on the shoulders of a forgotten partner." Click. The screen split. On the left, another page from my notes. On the right, a slide from his Geneva presentation. The text was nearly identical. "My work as a historian has always been my passion," I said, walking the audience through the evidence. "A passion I was happy to share." Click. An email from me to Julian. "I think I've found the core principle of their commodity future system. See attached?" Click. A later email from him to Marcus. "I've had a breakthrough. A new framework for predictive analysis. All my own work. See attached." The attachment was my document, renamed. Gasps were audible now. The string quartet had fallen silent. All eyes were darting between the screen, my calm face, and Julian's, which was rapidly draining of color. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. He started to rise, to protest, but Marcus put a firm hand on his shoulder, a silent warning. I presented my evidence for 5 devastating minutes. It was undeniable, meticulously documented, and utterly damning. I concluded with a slide showing a side-by-side comparison of my final thesis draft and the core tenets of the Vanguard strategy. They were one and the same. "The term helper is an interesting one," I said, my voice dropping slightly, becoming more personal. "It implies assistance, not origin. It implies a secondary role, not the foundational one. For 2 years, my intellectual property, my labor, and my passion formed the bedrock of this man's success. A fact he chose to erase with a condescending smile and the words, 'little helper.'" The silence in the room was absolute, heavy, and judgmental. The smiles were gone from the faces of his clients. The admiration had been replaced by suspicion and contempt. His public image, so carefully constructed, was shattering in real time. "So, for our 10th anniversary, I decided to give myself a gift," I said, delivering the coup de grace, the gift of acknowledgement and the gift of independence. My final slide appeared. It was a simple text block. "Pursuant to the pre-nuptial agreement of Elara Vance and Julian Thorne, a 50% share of all marital assets, valued at $87.4 million and directly attributable to the intellectual property developed by Ms. Vance, has been transferred to a new, independent trust. The paperwork was filed this afternoon at 3 p.m. I let that sink in. "A formal complaint for intellectual property theft will also be filed against Thorne Capital on Monday morning," I added, my voice ringing with finality. "Happy anniversary, Julian." I looked at him one last time. His face was a mask of pure, incandescent fury and utter ruin. The king was dethroned, naked in his own court. "The traditional gift for 10 years is tin or aluminum," I concluded, picking up my clutch from the lectern. "Both are fittingly common and lack the brilliance of gold. I, however, have always preferred gold." I clicked the remote and the screen went black. Then I walked off the platform, my crimson dress a slash of defiance in the funereal quiet. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. No one spoke. No one touched me. They just stared, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and a horrified sort of respect. I didn't look back. I walked through the opulent room, past the untouched canapes and the wilting flowers, and out the front door into the cool night air. My pre-booked car was waiting at the curb. As it pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. I couldn't see the house anymore, only the fading glow of the party lights. There was no elation, no wild cackle of victory. There was only a profound, quiet, and expansive peace. The weight of his world, which I had carried for a decade, was gone. The revenge wasn't just about destroying his reputation or taking the money. It was about reclaiming my name. It was about taking the story he tried to steal and writing my own ending. I was no longer a footnote in his history. I was the author of mine, and my first chapter was just beginning.